The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. I remember glancing at the digital clock on the microwave, its red numbers burning into the dark kitchen, 2:17 a.m. My body was a tight coil of anxiety, every muscle tensed for a sound I was desperately waiting to hear, the crunch of gravel under tires, the soft click of the front door, the creak of the third step from the top that Ryan always forgot to avoid. Ryan, my stepson, the boy who had entered my life a decade ago, a quiet, lanky 10-year-old with eyes that held a universe of confusion after his parents' divorce. Now he was 20, and the universe in his eyes had shifted to one of rebellion, of a simmering anger I felt ill-equipped to handle. My wife, Sarah, was asleep upstairs. She'd finally succumbed to exhaustion around midnight, her face pale against the pillow, etched with the same worry that gnawed at me. "He'll be fine, Mark," she'd whispered, more a prayer than a statement. "He's just blowing off steam. He's a good kid." I wanted to believe her. With every fiber of my being, I wanted to believe that Ryan was just a typical young adult testing his boundaries, staying out too late with friends. But the pit in my stomach, cold and heavy, told a different story. The last 6 months had been a slow, painful unraveling. The sullen silences at the dinner table had stretched into days. His grades, once solid, had plummeted. The sweet, if awkward, boy who used to build elaborate Lego sets with me in the living room had been replaced by a near stranger who smelled of cigarette smoke and carried a defensive energy that filled any room he entered. We'd had the talk, more than one. Sarah had pleaded, I had tried to reason, and we'd both laid down rules that were consistently, flagrantly broken. Grounding him was pointless, he'd just leave anyway. Taking away his phone felt like severing our last, tenuous connection. We were adrift in a storm with no land in sight, and I was failing as the captain. At 2:43 a.m., a pair of headlights swept across the living room window, painting fleeting ghosts on the walls. The engine cut out, and a car door slammed with a jarring finality. Relief washed over me, so potent it left me dizzy for a moment, quickly followed by a surge of white-hot anger. He was safe, but he had put us through hell again. I stayed in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, forcing my breathing to slow. I heard his key fumble in the lock, the door swing open, and his heavy, unsteady footsteps in the hallway. He was trying to be quiet, but his coordination was shot. He bumped into the console table, and a framed photo of us at the Grand Canyon wobbled precariously. He rounded the corner into the kitchen and froze when he saw me. His face, under the harsh fluorescent light, was a mask of defiance, but it was cracked. His eyes were bloodshot, his pupils too wide. His clothes were disheveled, and he reeked of stale beer and something else, something sweet and chemically I couldn't place. "Hey," he grunted, his voice thick. "Hey," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Ryan, it's almost 3 in the morning. Your mother was sick with worry. We called you 12 times. He shrugged, a lazy, infuriating gesture. My phone died. I was with Jake. Lost track of time. Lost track of time. I took a step forward, my voice rising despite my effort to control it. "That's your answer. You don't think to call. You don't think about anyone but yourself." His jaw tightened. "Here we go. The nightly lecture from Mark. Look, I'm home. I'm fine. Can I just go to bed?" "No, you cannot. Just go to bed." I snapped. "This isn't fine, Ryan. This is the 3rd time this month. This isn't about curfews. This is about you throwing your life away. What is going on with you? Is it drugs? Is that it?" The moment the word left my mouth, I knew it was a mistake. It was an accusation, not a question. It was the nuclear option. His face shut down completely. The defiance solidified into a wall of impenetrable ice. "You're not my father," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You don't get to interrogate me." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were his ultimate weapon, and he knew it. They were designed to wound, to push me away, to assert a boundary that, in his mind, I had no right to cross. And in my anger, in my exhaustion, I let him. I took a step back. I ran a hand over my face, the fatigue suddenly overwhelming. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. "Just go to your room, Ryan," I said, my voice flat. "We'll talk about this in the morning." He didn't hesitate. He turned and shuffled out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I heard his bedroom door slam shut, a period at the end of our failed conversation. I stood there for a long time in the silent, bright kitchen. I had won nothing. I had asserted no authority, offered no comfort, gained no understanding. I had simply ended the confrontation. I told myself I was picking my battles, that it was better to talk when we were both calmer. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had retreated. I had seen a glimpse of the chasm he was falling into, and instead of lunging forward to grab him, I had taken a step back. I wish, with every part of my being, that I had done more in that moment. The talk in the morning never happened. Ryan slept until past noon and then left the house with a mumbled apology to Sarah, who accepted it with a tearful hug. The tension simmered, but the crisis seemed, on the surface, to have passed. We fell back into our fragile, dysfunctional routine. I told myself that maybe it was just a phase, that he needed to find his own way. I buried my unease under a mountain of work and the day-to-day demands of life. But 3 weeks later, the real storm hit. It was a Tuesday. Ryan had been quieter than usual, almost withdrawn. He'd skipped dinner, claiming he wasn't hungry. Around 10 p.m., I heard a strange, rhythmic thumping coming from his room. Sarah was reading in bed, and she heard it too. We exchanged a look of alarm. I went to his door and knocked. "Ryan, you okay in there?" No answer. Just the thumping, faster now. "Ryan, I'm coming in." I opened the door. The scene that greeted me is seared into my memory. Ryan was on the floor, his body convulsing violently. His back was arching off the carpet, his limbs flailing. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and a faint foam was gathering at the corners of his lips. The thumping was his heels drumming against the floor. "Sarah," I yelled, my voice cracking with panic. "Call 911. Now." Time seemed to fracture. I dropped to my knees beside him, my first aid training from work a distant, useless echo. I was terrified to touch him, terrified not to. I remember fumbling to turn him on his side, the recovery position, anything to keep his airway clear. Sarah was on the phone, her voice high and shrill, relaying our address to the dispatcher. The ambulance arrived in a blur of flashing lights and efficient chaos. The paramedics took over, their movements calm and precise. They loaded my seizing stepson onto a gurney and sped off into the night, with Sarah sobbing in the passenger seat of their vehicle. I followed in my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. In the sterile, terrifying brightness of the emergency room, time lost all meaning. A doctor finally came to find us in the bleak waiting area. His face was grim. "Your son has experienced a severe seizure," he said. "We've stabilized him, but his tox screen came back positive for a number of substances. Most concerningly, we're seeing indicators of fentanyl." The word landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Fentanyl. I'd heard the news reports, the statistics about the opioid crisis. It was an abstract horror, something that happened to other people in other towns. It didn't happen to a boy who still had his high school baseball glove in his closet. "He's lucky to be alive," the doctor continued, his tone not unkind, but brutally factual. "The amount in his system, it was a very close call." Lucky. The word felt like a mockery. My stepson was lying in a hospital bed because of poison, and we were supposed to feel lucky. When we were allowed to see him, he looked heartbreakingly young and fragile. Tubes and wires snaked from his arms, and a monitor beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm beside the bed. The defiant, angry young man was gone, replaced by a pale, sleeping boy. That night, in the hospital, the guilt descended upon me like a shroud. It was a physical weight, crushing my chest and making it hard to breathe. Every missed sign, every avoided conversation, every time I had chosen the path of least resistance came rushing back. The late nights weren't just about drinking. The new, secretive friends. The money that went missing from Sarah's purse, which we'd written off as us being careless. The drastic mood swings we'd attributed to teenage angst. The lies, so flimsy and transparent, that we had wanted to believe because the alternative was too terrifying to confront. And the final, damning memory, me, standing in the kitchen, letting him walk away because he'd hurled the one insult he knew would hurt me the most. "You're not my father." In that moment, I had acted like a wounded man, not a parent. A parent fights through the hurt. A parent sees the cry for help hidden within the anger. I had seen the cliff's edge, and I had done nothing more than shout a warning as he stepped off. I wished I had done more. I wished I had hugged him in that kitchen, even if he pushed me away. I wished I had sat on the floor with him and said, "I don't care how angry you are, I love you, and we are going to figure this out together." I wished I had searched his room, had demanded to meet his friends, had dragged him to a therapist, had done anything other than retreat. His near-fatal overdose was not my fault, the choices were his, the drugs were his. But the environment of permissive avoidance. The lack of a firm, loving, intervention. That was on me. That was on us. Ryan's recovery was long and arduous. The physical part was one thing. Detoxing his body from the poison was a medical process. The psychological and emotional healing was the real battle. He was admitted to an inpatient rehabilitation facility. The first family therapy session was brutal. Ryan was resentful and closed off. Sarah was a river of grief and fear. And I had to confess my own failure. I saw the signs, I told the therapist, my voice thick with emotion. I looked at Ryan, who refused to meet my gaze. And I was scared. I was scared of pushing him away. I was scared of not being his real dad, of overstepping. So I backed off when I should have leaned in. My inaction, it almost cost him his life. It was the hardest admission I've ever made. But it was also the beginning of our healing. In that safe, structured space, the walls began to crumble. Ryan, over time, started to talk. He talked about the pain of his parents' divorce, a pain he'd carried for a decade. He talked about feeling like he didn't belong anywhere, like he was a guest in his own life. He talked about the pressure he felt, the emptiness, and how the drugs didn't start as a rebellion, but as an escape, a way to quiet the noise in his head and feel nothing for a little while. He told us that the night he came home late, the night of our fight, he had been high. He was terrified and ashamed, and my anger had just confirmed his belief that he was a disappointment, a lost cause. My retreat felt like an abandonment. Hearing that was like a knife to the heart. But it was the truth we needed to start rebuilding. The journey from that hospital room to today has been the hardest of our lives. Recovery is not a straight line, it's a path littered with triggers and setbacks. There have been days of brilliant hope and days of crushing doubt. But we faced them together, as a family, a real family, forged not just by love, but by shared trauma and a fierce, hard-won commitment to each other. Ryan has been sober for 18 months now. He's back in community college, studying graphic design. The light is back in his eyes. We talk now, really talk. We go to therapy together. We've learned new ways to communicate, to set boundaries without building walls. One evening, just a few weeks ago, we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. It was a comfortable silence, the kind we hadn't known in years. "Hey, Mark," he said, his voice quiet. "Yeah, buddy." He took a deep breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what I said that night. In the kitchen, you were my dad, in every way that matters. Tears welled in my eyes, and I didn't try to stop them. I put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. "You don't ever have to apologize for that again," I said. "I'm just so grateful you're here." The guilt hasn't completely vanished. I don't think it ever will. It's a ghost that lingers in the quiet moments, a permanent reminder of how close we came to losing everything. But I've learned to make peace with it. I use it as fuel, a reminder to never be a passive observer in the lives of the people I love. If you're watching this, and you see a piece of our story in your own life, if you're a parent, a step-parent, a family member seeing the warning signs in someone you love, please, learn from my failure. Don't be afraid to have the hard conversations. Don't mistake silence for peace. Don't let the fear of not being liked stop you from doing what is necessary to be loved. Anger is often a mask for profound pain. Rebellion is often a scream for a boundary, for someone to care enough to say, no. If you see the late nights, the changing friends, the secrecy, the shifts in personality, do not wait. Lean in. Ask the tough questions. Get help. It will be messy. It will be painful. You will be called names. You will be pushed away. Push back. Because the alternative, the cost of inaction, is a price no family should ever have to pay. My stepson came home late one night, and I wish, with every fiber of my being, that I had done more. Don't live with that same wish. Your love is stronger than their anger. Your action can be the rope that pulls them back from the edge.